The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wider than any building on Earth. Crystal walls rose hundreds of feet into the air, catching light from distant stars and scattering it across the polished floor. 7 massive thrones sat in a semicircle, each one designed for a different alien species. This was the heart of galactic power, the place where decisions affecting trillions of lives were made every day. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the center of the chamber, his blue uniform crisp and clean despite the long journey from Earth. His jaw was set firm, his hands clasped behind his back in a military stance that showed both respect and strength. He had traveled 3 weeks through hyperspace to reach this place, and he knew this meeting would change everything for humanity. Behind Jake stood 2 other humans. Lisa Chen, his tactical officer, held a datapad in her hands. Her dark eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the alien council members. Next to her was Kate Sullivan, Earth's diplomatic ambassador. Kate had lived on this station for 5 years, trying again and again to gain humanity a seat at the galactic table. Every time she had been rejected. The 7 council members looked down at Jake with expressions that ranged from boredom to open contempt. High Arbiter Velthar of the Krenathi Empire sat in the center throne. His reptilian face was covered in green scales that caught the light. His yellow eyes, cold and ancient, stared at the human commander without warmth. Velthar spoke first, his voice deep and rumbling through the chamber. So humanity returns once more to beg for acceptance. How many times must we refuse before you understand your place? Jake kept his face neutral. We are not here to beg, High Arbiter. We are here to discuss the terms of our membership in the Galactic Council. Several of the alien council members made sounds that might have been laughter. The Zephron representative, a being made of flowing energy contained in a crystalline form, pulsed with colors that Lisa's datapad translated as amusement. Velthar leaned forward in his throne. Membership? You claim to deserve membership? Let us review what humanity offers to the galaxy. He gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. Images of human ships flickered into view, rotating slowly so all could see. These are your warships, Velthar said, his voice dripping with scorn. Your largest carrier is barely 300 meters long. Your weapons are primitive chemical rockets and magnetic accelerators. Your shields cannot stop even basic plasma fire. He gestured again, and the human ships shrank as new images appeared beside them. These were Krenathi dreadnoughts, massive vessels that dwarfed the human ships like whales next to minnows. Each one bristled with weapon ports and glowed with the power of advanced shield generators. This is the Krenathi Third Fleet, Velthar continued. Any single dreadnought could destroy your entire navy. We have 300 such ships in that fleet alone. We have 40 fleets total. The other council members watched the display with satisfaction. They had all seen this comparison before, shown to every young species that thought it could demand respect without earning it first. Jake remained still, his expression unchanged. Lisa glanced at him, waiting for a signal, but he gave none. Not yet. And it is not only military power you lack, Velthar said. You have colonized only 17 star systems in 50 years of faster-than-light travel. The Krenathi Empire alone controls 7,000 systems. You have no advanced technology to offer, no resources we cannot obtain elsewhere, no knowledge we do not already possess. Tell me, Commander Morrison, what exactly does humanity bring to the Galactic Council? Jake took a slow breath. We bring determination. We bring innovation. We bring the ability to solve problems in ways you have never considered. More laughter echoed through the chamber. The Mechron Council member, a massive machine intelligence housed in a body of living metal, spoke with a voice like grinding gears. Innovation, the last refuge of the weak. Every young species claims innovation when they lack true power. Velthar raised a clawed hand for silence. Enough entertainment. Let us move to the real purpose of this meeting. Humanity has established colonies in 3 systems on the outer rim. The systems you call New Providence, Liberty Point, and Terra Nova. These systems fall within territory that the Krenathi Empire claimed 6,000 years ago. Jake's eyes narrowed slightly. Those systems were uninhabited when we arrived. No Krenathi presence existed there. Our colonies have been established for 12 years. Irrelevant, Velthar said flatly. Ancient claim supersedes new occupation. This is galactic law established long before your species learned to make fire. We are generous, however. We will allow your colonists to evacuate peacefully. You have 72 hours to remove all human presence from those 3 systems. The chamber fell silent. Jake could feel Kate tense beside him. This was worse than they had expected. Those 3 colonies held nearly 2 million human civilians. Families, children, people who had built homes and lives on those worlds. And if we refuse? Jake asked quietly. Velthar's mouth opened in what might have been a smile, showing rows of sharp teeth. Then the Krenathi Third Fleet will depart immediately to reclaim what is ours. Your colonies will be given one opportunity to surrender. If they do not, they will be destroyed. Any human ships that attempt to interfere will be swept aside. Lisa's fingers tightened on her datapad. Kate closed her eyes briefly, but Jake simply nodded slowly, as if he had expected exactly this response. I request 1 hour to consult with Earth Command, Jake said. This decision cannot be made without proper authorization. Velthar waved a claw dismissively. You have 1 hour. Use it to prepare your evacuation orders. This is not a negotiation, Commander. This is an ultimatum. The 3 humans were escorted from the council chamber by floating security drones. They walked through corridors of gleaming metal and crystal until they reached the secure communication room that Earth maintained on the station. Once inside with the door sealed and jamming fields active to prevent eavesdropping, Kate finally spoke. They are going to take those colonies no matter what we say, she said quietly. The Krenathi have wanted to push us back for years. This is their excuse. Jake moved to the communication console and began entering codes. I know. 2 million people, Jake, Kate continued. Even if we evacuate, where do they go? Our other colonies are already crowded. Earth itself has resource limitations. And this sets a terrible precedent. If we yield now, they will take more systems next year, and more after that until humanity is pushed back to Earth itself. I know, Jake repeated, his fingers flying across the controls. The communication system came to life, establishing a quantum-encrypted link to Earth Command. The face of Admiral Ben Crawford appeared on the screen. The Admiral was in his 60s, gray-haired and stern-faced, a man who had spent 40 years in Earth's Navy. He looked at Jake with eyes that had seen too many battles. Commander Morrison, the Admiral said. Report, Jake kept his summary brief and direct. He explained the ultimatum, the timeline, and the threat. Admiral Crawford listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each word. When Jake finished, silence filled the communication room for several long seconds. Then the Admiral spoke, his voice hard as steel. Do they truly believe we will yield to these threats? Yes, sir, Jake replied. They believe we have no choice. They are wrong, Admiral Crawford said. Commander Morrison, you are authorized to proceed with Protocol Daybreak. Authorization code, Alpha 77 Delta Whiskey, 9 or 5, confirm. Jake felt his heart rate increase slightly. Protocol Daybreak. They had hoped never to use it. Code confirmed, sir. Initiating Protocol Daybreak. Lisa looked up sharply from her datapad. Kate's eyes widened. They both knew what Protocol Daybreak meant. They had been briefed years ago when the protocol was first developed. They had hoped, like everyone else, that it would remain a theoretical option, never actually deployed. Admiral Crawford continued. All colonists in the 3 disputed systems were evacuated 2 weeks ago, under the cover of routine transport schedules. The colonies appear occupied, but only automated systems remain. Military personnel in those systems have been reduced to essential fleet units only. You know what must be done, Commander? Yes, sir, Jake said quietly. The galaxy needs to learn that humanity does not yield to threats, the Admiral said. They need to understand that we fight smarter, not harder. Good luck, Commander. History will judge what we do in the next 72 hours. The transmission ended. Jake stood before the blank screen for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he turned to face Kate and Lisa. You both understand what happens next, he said. It was not a question. Kate nodded slowly. We turn their star into a weapon. The new Providence star, Lisa confirmed, checking data on her pad. The gravitational lens arrays have been in position for 3 months, disguised as scientific research stations. All systems are operational and ready for activation. Jake looked at both women. This is the line. Once we cross it, there is no going back. The galaxy will never see humanity the same way again. They already see us as weak, Kate said firmly. Better to be feared than ignored. Jake nodded and moved toward the door. Then let's give them something to fear. They walked back through the corridors toward the council chamber. Jake's mind was clear now, his purpose set. In 72 hours, the Krenathi would learn that humanity could not be pushed. The Galactic Council would learn that military might was not the only form of power. When they entered the council chamber again, Velthar looked down at them with smug satisfaction. "Have you prepared your evacuation orders?" Jake stood straight, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Earth Command has reviewed your ultimatum. Our answer is this: we refuse. New Providence, Liberty Point, and Terra Nova are human colonies inhabited by human citizens. We will not abandon them. If you want those systems, you will have to take them by force." The chamber erupted. Several council members spoke at once, their voices rising in surprise and anger. Velthar silenced them with a gesture, then stared at Jake with cold fury. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Commander Morrison. The Krenathi Third Fleet will depart for New Providence within the hour. Your primitive ships will not even slow us down. We will take what is ours and your fleet will burn." Jake met the High Arbiter's gaze without flinching. "Then come and try." As the human delegation left the council chamber for the final time, Lisa quietly uploaded a final data package to their ship's computer. It contained complete stellar charts of the Krenathi home system, including detailed scans of their sun. Jake saw her nod of confirmation and felt the weight of what they had started settle onto his shoulders. The die was cast. Protocol Daybreak was active. In 72 hours, the galaxy would learn that humanity had mastered forces beyond anything the ancient empires understood. They would learn that stars themselves could become weapons in the hands of those who truly understood physics. The Galactic Council had laughed at human fleets. Soon they would learn the cost of that laughter. The Krenathi Third Fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. 300 warships dropped back into normal space at the edge of the New Providence system, their hulls gleaming under the light of the distant star. At the center of the formation floated 12 massive dreadnoughts, each one over 2 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Fleet Commander Dralmoth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the vengeance of ancient glory. His scaled hands gripped the command rail as he surveyed the tactical displays before him. The human colony system lay ahead, helpless and waiting. This would be an easy victory. A simple demonstration of Krenathi superiority. Within hours, the humans would understand their mistake. Dralmoth's second officer approached, holding a data tablet. "Commander, we have detected the human defensive fleet. 32 vessels total. 4 carriers, 12 destroyers, 16 frigates, all positioned in a defensive formation around the colony world." The commander studied the tactical map and felt something like pity. 32 ships against 300. The humans had courage, he would grant them that. But courage meant nothing against overwhelming force. Their largest carrier was smaller than his flagship's shuttle bay. "Send them a final warning," Dralmoth ordered. "Give them one last chance to evacuate and surrender the system." In the New Providence system, Captain Dan Miller stood on the bridge of the carrier Phoenix. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew the odds. But not a single person had requested transfer when the mission was announced. The communication officer spoke up. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Krenathi flagship. They are offering us one final chance to withdraw." Dan looked at the main view screen where the enemy fleet filled the display like a wall of metal and death. He was 43 years old and had spent 20 years in Earth's Navy. He had trained for this moment his entire career, though he had never imagined it would actually come. "Put them through," Dan said calmly. The face of Fleet Commander Dralmoth appeared on the screen. The Krenathi commander's yellow eyes studied Dan with what might have been contempt. "Human Captain, I am Fleet Commander Dralmoth of the Krenathi Third Fleet. You have one final opportunity to withdraw your forces and evacuate this system. If you do not, your ships will be destroyed and the colony will be claimed by force." Dan met the alien's gaze without flinching. "This is human space, Commander. You are the ones who should withdraw." Dralmoth's mouth opened slightly, showing sharp teeth. It might have been a smile or a sneer. "Your bravery is admirable but pointless. Look at your sensors. 300 warships stand ready to sweep you aside. You cannot win this battle." "Perhaps," Dan replied calmly, "but we can fight it." The Krenathi commander shook his head slowly. "Then you will watch your colony burn before your ships become debris." He cut the transmission abruptly. Dan turned to his crew. All hands, battle stations. Helm, execute defensive pattern Delta. Weapons free to engage at will. Communications, send to all ships, hold the line. Throughout the human fleet, crews rushed to their positions. Weapon systems came online, shields powered up to maximum strength. Every captain knew the mission. Hold the Krenathi fleet in the system for as long as possible. Every hour mattered. Every minute counted towards something the enemy could not see. The Krenathi fleet advanced in perfect formation, their ships moving with the confidence of overwhelming superiority. Dralmoth ordered his dreadnoughts to form the center line, while faster cruisers and destroyers swept out on the flanks. It was a classic attack pattern, designed to envelop and crush an inferior force. Captain Dan gave the order and the human fleet opened fire first. Railgun rounds streaked through space at tremendous velocity. Missiles launched from hundreds of tubes, their engines burning bright as they accelerated toward the enemy. The darkness between the fleets filled with weapons fire and burning exhaust trails. Some shots found their targets. Railgun rounds slammed into Krenathi shields, causing ripples of energy to spread across protective barriers. A few penetrated through, striking armor plating and scoring deep gouges in alien hull metal. 3 Krenathi cruisers took damage to their forward sections. 1 frigate lost its shield generator in a lucky missile strike, but the damage was minimal. The Krenathi shields were simply too strong, their armor too thick. For every hit the humans landed, 99 shots were absorbed or deflected harmlessly. Then the Krenathi returned fire, and everything changed. Plasma cannons, each one capable of melting through a mountain, unleashed torrents of superheated energy. The beams crossed the distance between fleets in seconds, slamming into human shields with devastating force. The destroyer Valiant took a direct hit from a dreadnought's main cannon. Its shields collapsed instantly. The plasma beam punched through the hull and detonated the ship's reactor. The Valiant exploded in a flash of white light, taking all 200 crew members with it. The frigate Hornet tried to evade incoming fire but was too slow. 3 plasma beams converged on its position. The forward third of the ship simply vaporized, torn apart by energies that no human shield could withstand. The aft section tumbled away, venting atmosphere and debris. Dan watched the tactical display as 2 friendly icons winked out of existence. All ships execute evasive pattern gamma. Concentrate fire on their cruiser line. We need to slow their advance. The human fleet scattered into a complex 3-dimensional formation, making themselves harder targets. They fell back slowly toward the colony world, firing as they retreated. It looked like a desperate defense by an outmatched force. To the Krenathi, it appeared to be the beginning of a rout. Dralmoth watched with satisfaction as human ships took hit after hit. Several were crippled, trailing debris and atmosphere. 1 carrier lost half its flight deck to a plasma strike. The humans were fighting bravely, but they were dying quickly. "Press the attack," he ordered. "Close to medium range and finish them." But on the Phoenix Bridge, Dan was watching a different display. A secondary screen showed a countdown timer that none of the Krenathi could detect. 68 hours remaining. His tactical officer, Chris Parker, leaned close and spoke quietly. "Captain, 3 more ships are reporting critical damage. The destroyer Lincoln is requesting permission to fall back." Dan shook his head. "Negative. All ships maintain formation. We hold this position." Chris understood. They all understood. The human fleet was not trying to win this battle. They were buying time. Every hour they kept the Krenathi fleet engaged in this system. The closer the real weapon came to completion. Throughout the system, automated stations floated in carefully calculated positions around the New Providence star. They looked like scientific research equipment, designed to study stellar phenomena. In reality, they were something far more dangerous. Each station contained gravitational lens generators, devices that could focus and manipulate exotic particles in ways that defied normal physics. The stations had been activated the moment Protocol Daybreak was authorized. Deep within the star's core, changes were already beginning. Fusion rates were increasing by tiny fractions. Core temperature was rising by microscopic degrees. Nothing dramatic yet, nothing that conventional sensors would detect. But the process had started and could not be stopped. The human fleet continued its desperate defense. The carrier Independence took multiple hits and lost main power. The destroyer Falcon had its engines shot out and began tumbling through space. But they kept fighting, kept firing, kept drawing Krenathi attention. Captain Dan received an encrypted message from Admiral Crawford back on Earth. It contained only 3 words, but they meant everything. Daybreak is active. Dan felt a chill run down his spine. The weapon was working. The star was being transformed. In approximately 67 hours, this entire system would be consumed in a supernova explosion. Everyone here, human and Krenathi alike, had that long to escape the blast radius. He turned to his communication officer. "Send to all ships on secure channel. Daybreak confirmed active. Hold the line for 66 more hours minimum, no matter the cost." Throughout the human fleet, captains received the message and understood what it meant. They had to keep the Krenathi here. Keep them engaged, keep them from detecting what was happening to the star. If the enemy discovered the truth too early and escaped, this entire sacrifice would be for nothing. The battle intensified. More human ships fell to Krenathi plasma fire. The destroyer Richmond broke apart under concentrated bombardment. The frigate Steadfast lost life support and had to evacuate its crew via escape pods. But the survivors fought on with desperate determination. Drellmoth grew puzzled by the human tactics. They were clearly losing. Their ships were being destroyed one by one. Yet they refused to retreat. They kept fighting, kept dying, for a colony world that was already doomed. It made no strategic sense. "Human psychology is difficult to understand," his second officer commented. "Perhaps they believe courage alone can overcome superior firepower." Drellmoth nodded slowly. "Or perhaps they are simply too stubborn to know when they are beaten. No matter, continue the attack. We will honor their bravery by making their deaths quick." But 3 Krenathi science vessels at the rear of the fleet had begun detecting unusual readings from the system's star. Junior officers noticed anomalies in the stellar radiation output. The numbers were strange, just slightly off from what they should be. Most dismissed it as sensor calibration errors or interference from the battle. One young Krenathi scientist named Trelvin studied the readings more carefully. Something was wrong with the star. The fusion rates in the core seemed elevated. It was subtle, barely detectable, but it was there. He filed a report with his superior officer, flagging it as potentially important. The report was added to a queue of hundreds of other reports. In the chaos of battle coordination, it would be hours before anyone with authority reviewed it. Meanwhile, the human fleet had been reduced to 18 functional ships. The Phoenix had taken severe damage, with hull breaches on multiple decks and fire suppression systems working overtime. But Captain Dan kept his ship in the fight, kept his weapons firing, kept his crew focused on their mission. On his private display, the countdown continued. 63 hours remaining. They had bought 5 hours so far at the cost of 14 ships and nearly 3,000 lives. The price was terrible, but the mission continued. Dan looked at the faces of his bridge crew. They were exhausted, some wounded, all aware that they might not survive the next few hours, but not one of them showed fear. They knew what they were fighting for. They knew that somewhere far behind the battle lines, colonists were safe. They knew that humanity's future depended on holding this line. "All weapons, continuous fire," Dan ordered. "Engineering, transfer all available power to forward shields. We are not backing down." The Phoenix shuddered as another plasma beam struck its shields. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, but the ship held together, and its railguns kept firing into the advancing Krenathi fleet. The battle raged on as the countdown continued its inexorable march towards zero. Back at the Galactic Council station, the observation gallery had filled with ambassadors from every member species. Large view screens displayed data streaming in from the New Providence system, showing the battle in progress. Many of the assembled aliens had placed wagers on how long the human fleet would last before being completely destroyed. Ambassador Kate Sullivan stood alone near the back of the gallery, her arms crossed and her face carefully neutral. She watched human ships die on the screens and forced herself to show no emotion. Inside, her heart ached for every crew member lost. But she could not let the other ambassadors see her pain. Not yet. Soon they would understand what humanity had truly done. A Zephron ambassador floated near her, its crystalline body pulsing with colors. "Your species fights with admirable courage," it said in translated speech. "But courage cannot overcome such a gap in power. Perhaps if humanity had accepted a junior partnership role as we suggested, this tragedy could have been avoided." Kate turned to look at the energy being. Perhaps the tragedy has not yet fully unfolded. The Zephron's colors shifted to confused patterns. But before it could respond, Kate walked away to a quieter corner of the gallery. She checked her communication device discreetly. A message from Earth Command had arrived minutes ago. One word, active. The weapon was working as planned. On Earth, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, Deep Station Alpha hummed with activity. The facility had been built in absolute secrecy over 5 years, designed for one purpose: to develop and control weapons that could change the balance of galactic power. Today, that purpose was being fulfilled. Dr. Paul Henderson sat at the central monitoring station, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time data from the New Providence system. The scientist was 56 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent the last 3 years of his life developing the technology that was now being used. The weight of what he had created pressed down on him like a physical burden. Core temperature increase holding steady at 0.003% per hour, reported Dr. Linda Martinez from her station. She was the team's expert on stellar dynamics, a woman who understood stars better than almost anyone alive. Her fingers moved across her controls, checking and rechecking calculations. The gravitational lens arrays are performing exactly as designed. Paul nodded but said nothing. Around them, 30 other scientists and technicians monitored different aspects of the operation. Every screen showed data about the star, about the exotic particles being focused into its core, about the fusion reactions accelerating beyond their natural rate. What they were doing was elegant in its terrible simplicity. By using artificially generated gravity wells, they were forcing specific particles into the star's core. These particles acted as catalysts, accelerating the fusion process. They were making the star burn through millions of years of fuel in a matter of hours. The result would be catastrophic core collapse followed by a supernova explosion. Evacuation status? Paul asked quietly. Linda checked another display. Final transport ships departed New Providence 6 hours ago. All colonists are confirmed safe and relocated to secondary facilities. The only humans remaining in the system are fleet personnel. Paul closed his eyes briefly. 3,000 men and women buying time with their lives. He had met some of them during training exercises years ago. Good people. Brave people. Now they were dying to give his weapon time to charge. How long until the star reaches critical instability? He asked. 58 hours at current rates, Linda replied. Once we pass the 40-hour mark, even if we shut down the arrays, the star will still go supernova. We will be past the point of no return. Paul looked at the main display showing the New Providence star. It looked completely normal to the naked eye. Just a yellow sun like billions of others scattered across the galaxy. But deep in its core, forces were building that would soon tear it apart. Any sign that the Krenati have detected the anomaly? Paul asked. Not yet, Linda said. The changes are too subtle for standard sensors. You would need specialized stellar analysis equipment positioned very close to the star to detect what we are doing, and even then, you would need to know what to look for. In the New Providence system, the battle continued to rage. The human fleet was down to 15 ships now. Captain Dan Miller's Phoenix was barely holding together, with multiple systems failing and casualty reports coming in from all decks. But they kept fighting, kept the Krenati engaged. What the humans did not know was that 3 Krenati science vessels had finally compiled enough data to recognize the pattern. The anomalous readings from the star were not sensor errors. They were real. Something was happening to the stellar core. Trelvin, the young Krenati scientist who had first noticed the irregularities, finally got his report in front of someone with authority. His superior officer, a veteran astrophysicist named Dralvin, reviewed the data with growing alarm. This cannot be correct, Dralvin muttered, running calculations on his console. These readings suggest accelerated core fusion, but that is impossible without external manipulation. That is what I have been trying to report for hours, Trelvin said urgently. Someone is doing this deliberately. Someone is weaponizing the star. Dralvin's eyes widened as the implications sank in. He immediately opened a communication channel to Fleet Commander Dralmoth on the flagship. Commander, this is Chief Scientist Dralvin on the research vessel Seeker of Truth. I have urgent information that requires your immediate attention. On the flagship bridge, Dralmoth was directing the final assault on the human fleet. The battle was nearly over. A few more hours and the last human ships would be destroyed. He answered the scientist's call with barely concealed irritation. This had better be important, Dralvin. I am in the middle of a battle. Commander, our star analysis team has detected critical anomalies in the system's primary star. The stellar core is experiencing accelerated fusion rates. If our calculations are correct, the star is becoming unstable. Dralmoth's irritation turned to confusion. Unstable? This star is barely middle-aged. It should remain stable for another billion years at least. Under normal circumstances, yes, Dralvin agreed. But these are not normal circumstances. Someone is artificially accelerating the fusion process. Commander, if this continues, the star will go supernova within the next 2 standard days. The bridge of the flagship fell silent. Officers turned to stare at their commander. The idea seemed absurd. Stars did not just suddenly go supernova. It took millions of years of natural processes, but the scientist's tone carried absolute certainty. That is impossible, Dralmoth said flatly. No known technology can weaponize a star. No known technology in our database, Dralvin corrected. But the readings do not lie, Commander. The star's core temperature is rising. Fusion rates are increasing. If we remain in this system, we will be caught in the blast when it explodes. Dralmoth looked at his tactical display, at the human ship still fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. A cold realization began to settle over him. The humans were not fighting to win. They had never expected to win. They were fighting to keep the Krenathi fleet here, to delay them, to buy time for something else. How long do we have? Dralmoth asked, his voice suddenly cold and hard. Difficult to say with precision, Dralvin replied. Based on current acceleration rates, I estimate between 48 and 60 hours until detonation. But Commander, these readings are unprecedented. There is significant uncertainty in my calculations. Dralmoth stared at the human ships on his display. So few left now, so badly damaged, yet still fighting. He finally understood. They were suicide troops. They had always been meant to die here, keeping his fleet occupied while their weapon charged. Science team, I want constant monitoring of that star, Dralmoth ordered. Alert me immediately if conditions worsen. Tactical. Prepare the fleet for emergency withdrawal. His second officer looked shocked. Commander, we are on the verge of complete victory. The human fleet is nearly destroyed. The humans do not care about this battle, Dralmoth said quietly. They care about keeping us here until their star destroys us all. Prepare for withdrawal but maintain attack formation. We will continue engaging them while our scientists confirm the threat. Over the next several hours, Krenathi science vessels focused all their sensors on the New Providence star. They compiled data, ran simulations, checked and rechecked their calculations. Each new analysis confirmed the same terrifying conclusion. The star was going to explode, and it would happen soon. At Deep Station Alpha, alarms began to sound. Linda Martinez looked up from her console with surprise. Paul, the Krenathi are performing active stellar analysis. They are scanning the star with specialized equipment. They are going to figure out what we are doing. Paul felt his stomach tighten. How long before they have confirmation? They may already have it, Linda replied. The anomalies are obvious if you know where to look and have the right instruments. Paul nodded slowly. This was always a possibility. The question was whether the Krenathi would believe their own data in time to escape, or whether arrogance would keep them in the system long enough. In the New Providence system, Fleet Commander Dralmoth received the final report from his science team. 3 independent analysis groups had all reached the same conclusion. The star would explode in approximately 48 hours. The lethal blast radius would extend to at least 2 light hours from the star. His fleet was currently only 1.5 light hours away. All ships cease fire and break off attack, Dralmoth ordered. Fleet-wide hyperspace jump. Set course for the edge of the system. Emergency speed. Throughout the Krenathi armada, ships began to disengage. The massive dreadnoughts turned away from the human fleet and began accelerating toward the system's edge. Smaller vessels followed, the entire formation breaking apart in a rush to escape. On the Phoenix, Captain Dan watched in surprise as the Krenathi suddenly retreated. His tactical officer Chris spoke up with confusion in his voice. Captain, they are withdrawing. All enemy vessels are breaking off and heading for the system perimeter. Dan felt a chill run down his spine. They knew. Somehow, the Krenathi had discovered what was happening to the star. The secret was out. He checked his countdown display. 47 hours remaining. The Krenathi were 1.5 light hours from the star and accelerating. If they reached hyperspace jump distance before the detonation, many of them would escape. All ships, Dan broadcast on the command channel. They know about daybreak. Begin emergency evacuation procedures. Proceed to Rally Point Charlie at maximum speed. The human fleet turned away from the retreating Krenathi and began accelerating in the opposite direction. But many of the human ships were severely damaged. Their engines were crippled. Their systems were failing. Not all of them would make it out in time. The Krenathi Third Fleet scattered like frightened birds as ships raced toward the edge of the system. Every vessel pushed its engines to maximum power, desperate to reach safe hyperspace jump distance before the star exploded. Fleet Commander Dralmoth stood on his flagship bridge watching the tactical display with growing dread as his formation fell apart in the panic to escape. The massive dreadnoughts, built for power and intimidation rather than speed, struggled to keep pace with the smaller cruisers and frigates. Their enormous engines burned at full capacity, but their sheer mass worked against them. Some captains began dumping cargo and non-essential equipment to reduce weight, desperate for any advantage that might save their crews. Dralmoth contacted his science officer. "Dralvin, give me updated calculations. Can we escape the blast radius in time?" The scientist's response came quickly, but his voice carried uncertainty. "Commander, the lethal radius for a supernova of this type extends approximately 2 light hours from the star. We are currently 1.5 light hours away and accelerating. Our fastest ships will clear the danger zone with approximately 3 hours to spare. However, our dreadnoughts are moving slower. They will be cutting it very close." "How close?" Dralmoth demanded. "Some may be just inside the lethal radius when detonation occurs," Dralvin admitted. "I cannot be more precise. We do not have experience with artificially triggered supernovas. The humans have created something entirely new." Dralmoth felt cold fury wash over him. The humans had done this. Those primitive creatures with their small ships and basic weapons had somehow learned to turn stars into bombs. They had weaponized the most powerful force in nature itself, and now his proud fleet was running like cowards, racing to escape the trap that had been set for them. On the Phoenix, Captain Dan Miller faced his own crisis. The carrier had taken tremendous damage during the battle. Hull breaches covered 3 decks. The main engine was running at only 60% capacity. Life support was failing in multiple sections. His chief engineer appeared on the communication screen with bad news written across his face. "Captain, we have a serious problem. The port engine is overheating. If we keep pushing at maximum speed, it will fail within the next 6 hours. When that happens, we will lose half our thrust." Dan checked his countdown display. 42 hours until detonation. They were 1.8 light hours from the star, and moving away as fast as damaged systems allowed. Every calculation showed they would barely make it to safety. If they lost engine power now, they would be caught in the blast. "Keep it running," Dan ordered. "Do whatever you need to do. We cannot afford to slow down." Throughout the human fleet, similar conversations were happening. Ships that had fought valiantly against impossible odds now faced a new enemy: their own damaged systems. The destroyer Falcon had lost primary power to its engines entirely. The cruiser Independence was venting atmosphere from dozens of leaks. The frigate Ranger had taken a direct hit to its navigation systems and was flying on manual control. Captain Dan made the hardest decision of his career. He opened a fleet-wide channel and spoke in a steady voice that betrayed none of the emotion he felt inside. "This is Phoenix Actual to all ships. Any vessel that cannot maintain minimum safe speed must transfer crew to functional ships immediately. We do not have time for extensive repairs. Evacuation shuttles will begin transfers within the hour." The response came from Captain Helen Brooks of the Falcon. Her voice was calm despite the situation. "Phoenix, this is Falcon. Our main drive is completely offline. We cannot achieve escape velocity. Request permission to begin crew evacuation." "Permission granted, Falcon," Dan replied. "Transfer all personnel to the nearest functional vessel." 2 other ships reported similar problems. The Independence and the Ranger would not make it out of the system under their own power. Their crews would have to abandon ship and hope the receiving vessels could carry the extra personnel safely. Evacuation shuttles began launching from the crippled ships. Small craft moved between vessels, ferrying crews to safety while time ticked away. Every shuttle pilot pushed their craft to the limit, knowing that every minute saved could mean the difference between life and death. On the Falcon, Captain Helen Brooks supervised the evacuation of her crew. She watched as her people filed into shuttles in an orderly fashion. No panic, just professional efficiency. 300 crew members needed to transfer. The shuttles could carry 30 each. It would take 10 trips minimum. Helen stood on her bridge as it slowly emptied of personnel. Her executive officer was among the last to leave. He paused at the shuttle door and looked back at her. "Captain, you need to come with this group. There is no reason for you to stay." Helen shook her head. "I stay with my ship until the last shuttle departs." "That is how this works," the officer nodded, understanding. He climbed aboard and the shuttle departed. Helen was alone on the bridge now, surrounded by flashing warning lights and damage alerts. She looked at the view screen showing the star that would soon kill her ship. The Falcon had served well. It deserved to die with dignity. At Deep Station Alpha on Earth, Dr. Paul Henderson monitored the evacuation efforts with growing concern. Linda Martinez stood beside him, reviewing data on her portable screen. "The Krenathi fleet will mostly escape," Linda reported. "Our projections show that approximately 80% of their ships will clear the lethal radius before detonation. The trailing dreadnoughts are at risk, but even they have a reasonable chance of survival." Paul nodded slowly. "And our fleet?" 15 ships will escape safely," Linda said quietly. 3 ships are being abandoned. If the evacuations complete on schedule, we will lose no personnel, only the ships themselves. Paul felt the weight of those words. 3 ships, billions of dollars in equipment and years of construction. But more importantly, 3 vessels that had fought bravely and would now be left behind to burn in the supernova. It seemed like a small price compared to the lives that would be saved, but it still hurt. Back in the New Providence system, the final shuttle departed from the Falcon. Captain Helen Brooks was aboard, the last person to leave her ship. As the shuttle accelerated toward the Phoenix, she watched through the viewport as her command grew smaller in the distance. The Falcon hung in space, dark and empty, a ghost ship waiting for the end. Similar scenes played out at the Independence and the Ranger. Crews evacuated. Captains took their final walks through empty corridors. Ships that had protected humanity were abandoned to their fate. The Phoenix received the last shuttle and immediately began accelerating at maximum speed. Captain Dan felt the deck shudder as the overworked engines strained to push the carrier and its overcrowded crew to safety. They now had over 800 people aboard a ship designed for 500. Life support was stretched to its limits. Crew members slept in shifts in any available space. The Krenathi fleet continued its own desperate flight. Fleet Commander Dralmoth received constant updates on ship positions and projected escape times. Most of his fleet would survive. But not all. The 3 rearmost dreadnoughts were falling behind, their massive bulk working against them in this race against stellar fire. Dralmoth considered ordering other ships to slow down and assist the stragglers, but he knew it would be pointless. Any ship that slowed would also be caught in the blast. There was nothing to be done. Some ships would make it, others would not. That was the cruel mathematics of the situation. At the Galactic Council station, word had spread about what was happening in the New Providence system. Ambassadors gathered in emergency sessions. The revelation that humanity had weaponized a star sent shockwaves through the galactic political structure. Some species called for immediate military action against Earth. Others sat in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what it meant. Ambassador Kate Sullivan received clearance to address the council. She stood before them with her shoulders back and her voice steady. The Galactic Council demanded that humanity surrender our colonies or face military destruction. We chose a third option. We demonstrated that military might is not the only form of power in the universe. We have shown that understanding stellar physics can be more effective than building larger dreadnoughts. High Arbiter Velthar glared at her with barely controlled rage. "You are monsters. You have destroyed a star. You are killing thousands of Krenathi warriors." Kate met his gaze without flinching. Every Krenathi ship had 42 hours warning to leave the system. Any casualties are the result of your fleet commander's decision to remain and prosecute an attack. We did not force your fleet to stay. You chose to threaten human colonies. We chose to defend them with every tool at our disposal. She paused and looked at each council member in turn. Consider this carefully. If humanity can weaponize one star, we can weaponize any star. Every system in Krenathi space becomes vulnerable. Every homeworld. Every colony. How long would your empire last if we decided to destroy your sons one by one? The council chamber fell into shocked silence. The implications were staggering. Humanity had just demonstrated a weapon that made traditional military power almost irrelevant. No shield could stop a supernova. No armor could protect against stellar fire. Every species in the galaxy was suddenly vulnerable to a threat they had never imagined. In the New Providence system, both fleets continued their race against time. The countdown marched steadily toward zero. Ships accelerated as fast as damaged systems and physics allowed. Behind them, deep in the core of the star, forces built toward inevitable catastrophe. The evacuation was complete. Everyone who could be saved had been saved. Now it was simply a matter of speed and distance and time. Some would escape. Some would not. The universe cared nothing for courage or determination. Only cold mathematics would determine who lived and who died when the star finally tore itself apart. The final hour before detonation passed in tense silence aboard every ship in both fleets. Human and Krenathi vessels alike pushed their engines beyond safe limits, racing away from the dying star. Captain Dan Miller stood on the Phoenix Bridge watching the countdown display tick toward zero. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, knowing there was nothing more they could do now except wait and hope. The carrier had traveled 2.2 light hours from the star. According to every calculation, they were safe. But calculations could be wrong. Supernovas were unpredictable events even under natural circumstances. An artificially triggered stellar explosion had never been attempted before. No one truly knew how powerful the blast would be. At Deep Station Alpha on Earth, Dr. Paul Henderson watched the same countdown on his screens. The monitoring stations around the New Providence star continued to send data right up until the final moments. The stellar core temperature had reached critical levels. Fusion rates had accelerated beyond the point of sustainability. The star was balanced on a knife edge, ready to tear itself apart. 60 seconds, Linda Martinez announced to the assembled scientists and technicians. Every person in the facility stopped what they were doing and turned to watch the main display showing a real-time feed of the star. Paul felt his hands trembling slightly. 3 years of work, countless hours of calculations and simulations and testing. All of it came down to this single moment. If the weapon failed, if the star somehow stabilized, humanity would have revealed its greatest secret for nothing. But if it succeeded, the galaxy would never be the same. 30 seconds, Linda said quietly. On the Krenathi flagship, Fleet Commander Dralmoth stood with his claws gripping the command rail so tightly, they left marks in the metal. His fleet had reached 2.1 light hours from the star. Most of his ships were safe, but 3 dreadnoughts still lagged behind, struggling to reach minimum safe distance. 60,000 warriors on those ships, all watching the same countdown, all knowing they might not escape. 10 seconds, his science officer reported. Dralmoth watched the tactical display showing the positions of every ship. The trailing dreadnoughts were so close to safety, just minutes away from clearing the lethal radius, but they had run out of time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the science officer counted down. The star exploded. It happened faster than human eyes could perceive, even through sensors and recordings. The outer layers of the star blew off at tremendous velocity, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The core collapsed inward under its own gravity, then rebounded in a catastrophic explosion that released energy equivalent to millions of years of normal, stellar output compressed into seconds. A wave of electromagnetic radiation burst outward at the speed of light, an invisible wall of deadly energy that struck the fleeing ships before they could react. The Phoenix shields flared as radiation levels spiked dramatically. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as systems struggled to compensate. The shield generators overloaded and failed, but backup systems engaged immediately, maintaining protection. Captain Dan gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered violently. The lights flickered. Sparks flew from several consoles, but the Phoenix held together. The radiation passed over them and continued spreading outward into space. Shield status? Dan demanded. Backup shields holding at 30%, his tactical officer Chris reported. We took heavy radiation exposure, but within survivable parameters. All compartments maintaining integrity. Throughout the human fleet, similar reports came in. Every ship had been hit by the electromagnetic pulse. Several lost primary shields. The destroyer Lincoln suffered a reactor fluctuation that took main power offline temporarily. But every human vessel survived. They had positioned themselves correctly and their calculations had been accurate. The Krenathi fleet was not as fortunate. The 3 trailing dreadnoughts were caught just inside the lethal radius when the radiation wave hit. Their shields, designed to stop plasma weapons and kinetic projectiles, were overwhelmed instantly by the sheer magnitude of energy washing over them. The protective barriers collapsed and raw stellar radiation flooded through the ships. Dralmoth watched in horror as 3 icons on his tactical display changed from green to red. The Dreadnought's Glory of Ancestors, Fist of Empire, and Eternal Conquest all went dark simultaneously. No communications, no life signs, no power signatures. 3 massive warships, each carrying 20,000 crew, simply ceased to exist as functional vessels. Seconds later, the shockwave of charged particles arrived, moving slower than light but carrying devastating kinetic energy. The wave struck the dead dreadnoughts and tore them apart. Armor plating that could withstand plasma fire vaporized under the assault. The ships broke into fragments that tumbled away into the expanding nebula. 60,000 Krenathi warriors died in an instant, atomized by forces they had never imagined could be weaponized. Additional ships closer to the edge of the danger zone suffered damage from the shockwave, but survived. 12 cruisers and destroyers reported hull breaches and casualties. But the bulk of the Krenathi fleet, positioned further away, weathered the storm intact. Behind both fleets, the New Providence star that had burned steadily for billions of years was gone. In its place, an expanding cloud of superheated gas began to form, glowing with the colors of ionized elements. It would eventually become a beautiful nebula, a cosmic monument to the day humanity demonstrated its power to the galaxy. At the Galactic Council Station, every ambassador watched the event through long-range sensors. The chamber was absolutely silent as the star exploded on their displays. No one spoke. No one moved. The implications were too enormous to immediately process. Ambassador Kate Sullivan stood before them and broke the silence. Humanity has demonstrated that we possess the capability to destroy stars. We can turn any sun into a weapon. No shield can stop a supernova. No fleet can defend against stellar fire. Every species in this chamber must now recognize that military superiority is no longer determined by the size of your dreadnoughts. She paused and looked directly at High Arbiter Velthar. The Krenathi Empire threatened human colonies with destruction. We responded by showing that we could destroy Krenathi suns just as easily. Your fleet is crippled, your warriors are dead, and this is only one star. Imagine if we decided to trigger supernovas in every Krenathi system simultaneously. Your entire empire could be erased in a single coordinated strike. Velthar's scaled face had gone pale. His yellow eyes showed something humans had never seen there before. Genuine fear. You would commit genocide on such a scale? We would defend ourselves with whatever means necessary, Kate replied firmly. But we prefer not to. Humanity came to this council seeking partnership and equality. We were offered ultimatums and threats instead. So we demonstrated our capabilities in a way that could not be ignored. Now we ask again, will the Galactic Council grant humanity full membership, or must we continue proving our power? The council members looked at each other. The old certainties had been shattered. Everything they thought they knew about galactic power dynamics had changed in an instant. A species they had dismissed as primitive had just demonstrated technology that made them the most dangerous force in known space. High Arbiter Velthar spoke slowly, his voice heavy with defeat. The Galactic Council recognizes humanity's petition for membership. You will be granted a full seat with all rights and privileges. All territorial claims against human-settled systems are hereby withdrawn. Kate nodded once. Humanity accepts. We look forward to working with all Council species as equals, and to demonstrate our good faith, we offer to share our stellar engineering technology for peaceful purposes. Imagine what we could accomplish together. Dying stars could be rejuvenated. New systems could be created for colonization. The technology that won us this seat can also benefit every species represented here. Over the following weeks, the galaxy adjusted to its new reality. Humanity took its place on the Galactic Council not as junior partners or supplicants, but as a major power that commanded respect. Other species approached Earth with caution, some with fear, all with newfound regard for what humans could accomplish. Dr. Paul Henderson and his team began the next phase of their work. The weapon that had destroyed the New Providence star became a tool for construction rather than destruction. Human scientists worked with alien researchers to extend the lives of dying stars and create new habitable systems. The forces that had won humanity its seat now reshaped the galaxy for the benefit of all. Captain Dan Miller and the survivors of the New Providence battle returned to Earth as heroes. They had held the line against impossible odds and bought the time needed for the weapon to charge. Their sacrifice and courage became legend throughout human space. A memorial station was constructed at the edge of what had been the New Providence system. Names were inscribed on walls of polished metal. Human fleet members who died in the battle, Krenathi warriors who perished in the Supernova. Even the colonists who had evacuated were honored for their sacrifice of homes and lives they had built. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity, the youngest species to achieve space travel, had proven that innovation and scientific understanding could overcome ancient military might. The Galactic Council had laughed at human fleets and dismissed Earth's petition for membership. They would never make that mistake again. Ambassador Kate Sullivan took her place as humanity's permanent representative, working to build bridges between species and transform fear into cooperation. She carried the knowledge that Earth possessed ultimate power, but she used that knowledge to create peace rather than domination. And in every star system across the galaxy, species that had ruled for millennia now looked at their own suns and wondered, could the humans do this here too? The answer was yes, and that answer changed everything. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars not through conquest, but through understanding the very nature of those stars themselves. The age of human ascendancy had begun.